Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leire Asensio Villoria. I am a senior lecturer in architecture and urban design, co-director of the Advanced Digital Design and Fabrication Research Hub at the University of Melbourne, Melbourne School of Design. And I'm co-convener together with David Ma of this event. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Artificial Intelligence and Design Culture event. But before we start today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this event takes place, the land of the Wurundjeri, and I pay respects to the elders and family past, present, and emerging.
So today we will have a series of presentations from creative practitioners and researchers who've been exploring the use of AI in their respective creative processes. The speakers will come from an array of design and fine art backgrounds and will offer a cross-section that allows us to hear their reflections on how the emergence of generative AI tools has or may transform creative practice more generally. In order of their presentations, today we'll hear from Dr. Jay Rosenbaum, an artist and AI researcher at RMIT University, Hilary Campilan, a senior creative at the ABC, director and motion graphics artist, Leire Asensio Villoria and David Ma ourselves of Asensio Ma and the Melbourne School of Design, Nick Bao, researcher and educator at RMIT School of Architecture and Urban Design, Mond Q, designer and founder of United Make and the AA Visiting School Melbourne, and Wei Tan and Patrick Macasaet of Superscale, RMIT and the MSD. After these presentations, we plan to have a group conversation where larger themes surrounding AI and design culture can be elaborated on, and you're also invited to ask questions as well. So without further ado, I'll invite the first presenter, Jay Rosenbaum. Thank you.
So, hi everyone, my name is Dr. Jay Rosenbaum. I'm a sessional lecturer at RMIT in digital media and design. You'll have to excuse my flexing just a little. I literally just graduated, so this is the very first event. Thank you. So my topic was AI perceptions of gender. And I want to talk today about how that topic relates to the work I currently have on show here at the Science Gallery, and why it's relevant to the topic of AI and design. And I don't quite know how to work this. There we go. Okay. Sorry. All of my work uses AI these days, from the earliest works using style transfer and augmented reality to generative adversarial networks, image classifiers and examinations of existing systems, and now to text and image AI or latent diffusion. In Set in Stone, I worked with biasing a GAN and unbiasing it to show what it looks like when I add new data while it's training. This work was showed as a wallpaper print, installation, and as a large-scale projection at Gertrude Street Projection Festival. And it is not animating. We'll just move on with that. In Frankenstein's Telephone, I connected several existing AI systems to explore gender and where the different AI systems assign gender and how. Looking at the results of mass worker-produced datasets to see where that gendering emerges. I even used AI to help me design my PhD virtual exhibition, where I worked with Midjourney to design the spaces and Blender to construct the designs, which were then hosted in Spatial. I recently showed one of my PhD works at ACME, where users interacted with an image classifier to receive a different custom mixed color, the results of a custom multi-label image classifier. We often say that gender is a spectrum without considering that it is more than a linear construct. So I began this project to explore not only the history of facial recognition and gender classification, but also colour perception. So like different computer monitors, most humans experience colour in different ways. Some differences are huge, while some are very small, but we all see colour uniquely. So the theory I explored throughout was to consider gender perception and experience as much the same way as colour perception, that everyone has a slightly different experience of gender. Because it's informed by our life experiences and our own personal perception of our own gender. We all have different experiences. So I wanted to create something that equated colour with gender, so that instead of receiving a gender classification, people would receive their own unique colour mix in RGB. So Gender Tapestry is a work that explores gender as a 3D colour space. The final result was an evolving mosaic using the colour results of the users and again trained on their faces. The mosaic gained in complexity as more people interacted with the system and received their custom gender colours. I particularly enjoy working with multiple AI systems in a complex network of multimodal interaction. So throughout my research, I've particularly explored gender classification and its fallibility and lack of inclusiveness. So I may have started Gender Tapestry with the aim of creating a better way to look at gender classification, but in the process, I think I've explored a bit of a better way to look at gender. There we go. This latest work, Self-Portrait, is exploring gender again through the different connected AI systems that examine how certain words, like personality terms, can have gendered connotations. So like moody, emotional, stoic, words like that. It uses a classifier trained on certain word groups and assigns those to the user. It then passes a prompt to Stable Diffusion using control nets, which determine the viewer's head position, so that the AI could draw its interpretation of what a person with those words would look like. But, of course, we shouldn't just accept what an AI says about us. So, there's a second stage to the work, where the user can choose to accept the terms or change them to better suit themselves. And then a new portrait is generated and transplanted onto the viewer's face using augmented reality. All of this must use AI. Like, there's no way that users will get original works every time without using a system like Stable Diffusion. The AI is intrinsically tied to this artwork, just as gender is, because it's an examination of the assumptions that AI makes about us. And it does. Different AI systems make snap judgments of us every day, from our browsing habits to our social media interactions, to even our style of writing or our gait, and our photographs. Our music choices, our shopping habits, all of them go into profiling you individually on each of these signs. And the profile isn't what we choose. It just is. We don't get a say in how we're profiled. And because of profiling and the biases that get reinforced in AI, more insidious systems may end up causing issues. Job searching and applications, the justice system, financial systems. This work can't show the breadth of AI access and overreach, but it can show how we take the labels different AI systems assign us for granted. I consulted with the classifier, or consulted for the classifier with ChatGPT to produce a list of words associated with gender and generated batches of faces using those terms in Stable Diffusion. It is AI all the way down. Because I wanted to fill in the data set with images specifically associated with those words. I really like using AI in the different stages of development, because it's always about how AI perceives with specific words, with its assumptions, how it interprets things. So it's not about my biases and assumptions. It's about what is AI biased in? What does AI make assumptions about? So I use AI in the stages of development, ideation, planning, data set generation, and of course the inevitable programming woes. And it isn't because I think AI is the be all and end all, but because I think that interrogating AI with AI is the best way to understand the limits of AI. It magnifies biases. So what better way to hold up a mirror to those issues than with AI? This work is about labels and about accepting or not the labels that are given us by external forces. This was inspired by a conversation I had with family about labels over lunch one day. I think that in the past, labels were something that happened to us, that people hung on us. Autistic, transgender, non-binary, it's words that people would, get queer, words that people would assign us rather than the ones we chose, and they ostracized us for our labels. Now, labels are something we claim for ourselves with pride. They help us find communities and connection. They can still be sources for ostracization, don't get me wrong, but they are most often chosen and accepted and embraced. This work is not just about accepting the labels thrust upon us by an unknowing and uncaring machine, but choosing our labels for ourselves. I particularly enjoy watching people use the system and laugh as their assigned labels come up, and then take great care choosing the labels that make their own. The care and interest that those words mean for each person, that's what this work is really about. So ironically, for a design lecturer, I'm not actually particularly good at design, especially user experience. Most of my work is based in the command line and in code. I work in the back end, and my user design experience skills are really limited. So thankfully, the Science Gallery paired me up with Melanie Huang, who is an absolute wizard, and together we turned all of my crazy ideas into a cohesive and engaging work. We worked together to create something wonderful, and I'm forever grateful for that collaboration. I'm planning some future works that look at demystifying AI systems and making the work visible and physical, connecting the body to the AI. I'm exploring an improvisational stage design concept, and I'm constantly rewriting my syllabus because the technology is moving so quickly that it's almost a full-time job to keep on top of. So for me, gender remains a critical issue in AI systems, from the categorization and misgendering of people to the biases and continued perception of gender as a binary rather than as a spectrum. Most gender classification systems work on a binary and don't allow for the myriad differences of humanity. And therefore, they're incorrect much of the time. But through my research, I've largely ended up with the question, why? Why do these systems need to know people's genders at all? Why is so much time and energy taken up with trying to classify something that could be deduced with a simple question? Instead of trying to use AI to determine your gender, all that really needs to be asked is, what are your pronouns? Thank you.
Okay. Hello everyone. Just a little bit about me. I'm a senior creative at ABC in Sydney. My role is sort of making short form content like promos and idents. These days I'm a director, an editor, script writer, but my past is in design. I was a motion designer. I studied 3D animation at uni, and I was the head of design at MTV Australia for a while. So mostly, TV is my role. So about a year ago, generative AI became possible, and I just sort of fell in love with the possibilities of it. And I started using all these different tools as a hobby late at night after work, so not really at work, but on my own. And these are all the sort of different things I've been trying out. Interested in if anyone here has tried warp fusion? No? Okay. But my greatest love has been AI animation, given my background. So a lot of this was done before a control net was possible, so it's all going to look a little bit jittery, but you'll get the idea.
Does it feel like all your feedback systems are activated when you're moving through the motions, ever changing? You're wanting more. There you go, where the water flows, sipping through each current, you're good to go. Oh, like the wild wind blows, smashing waters with fire in your eyes. My inspiration, baby. My adoration.
So just getting back to work for a second. ABC is obviously, it's a public broadcaster paid for by the taxpayers. So we have to be very cautious about whether we're going to use AI or not. If I ask to use AI at work, the general answer is discuss with the lawyers first, because obviously they got to look into the copyright of it, the enterprise agreements with the various platforms. We have an editorials policy department, and they will look at the ethics. Does it fit our charter? What would the public perception be if we started using AI? So in general, we only use AI in the background. So like when I'm directing a shoot, I might make a storyboard using AI, which is much quicker, looks much better than my little sketches I used to do. And obviously we have Four Corners programs about the problems with AI. So, but that being said, we are doing our first project using AI. So this wasn't designed by me. This was a designer we have called Claire Goodall, and she's been prompting in Midjourney, and then but all the different elements, and then putting them together in Photoshop and mixing it with the talent photography of Will Anderson, and then up-resing it so it's high resolution for print. And then obviously we've got a little tagline at the bottom: real intelligence, artificially enhanced, because we want to be very clear that this was generated using the help of AI. And then I've been making a promo. Again, this is still just mock-up, not finished. Not a proper mix on it yet, but using AI animation.
Gruen is back for a brand new season, bringing enhanced host technology using AI, CGI, and GPT on your ABC.
What the?
Analyzing advertising, utilizing facial recognition technology.
Unsubscribe!
Now that's genius!
It's the future! It's terrifying.
It's already here.
It sounds like hell.
Gruen, returning June 21 to ABC TV and ABC iView.
Doing ads makes me feel so inhuman.
So we feel like Gruen is maybe a good test subject. These are just different little animations that I was making before the whole promo. The graphics design was done by another guy called Richard, but I generated the little Will Andersons. And here's a little explanation of the different animation tools that I've been using.
Now, I love animation.
I've been testing out different AI animation tools over the last year or so. It's incredibly difficult to keep up with all the options. Mostly, I use a combination of programs. Runway app to key out the dancing footage, then Stable Diffusion run locally on my machine for the generations. Coders can share new scripts with you, which are forever evolving.
It sounds geeky, but you push a button.
In this embarrassing animation of my talking head, I've combined AI generation with a program that I love called EB Synth. The traditional way of using EB Synth is to take one or two keyframes from a video sequence and matte painting over it, say in something like Procreate. Then the software matches the vision to your drawing.
So this is magic then?
This is Runway app, recently valued at 500 million. Runway app's green screening feature is amazing.
I know it's not neurosurgery, but green screen's the one part of my job that's not really easy.
And I'm just going to click on my dancer a couple times to let the technology know when I want to rotoscope, and it just rotoscopes it instantly.
Runway has many new AI features and is probably the most user-friendly program for motion designers. Its new features include text-to-video generation and video-to-video generation. Often I have dancers and musicians who contact me and want to collaborate. This is what I enjoy most, but there's rarely any budget.
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
Currently, I'm making a music video for a British artist, and I'm testing a program called Caber. It's a user-friendly but expensive option. Every week there seems to be a new tool or a new method for AI animation, so my presentation will be completely out of date very soon.
I make the robots seem more human.
Thank you and good day.
So I hope you see from that generative AI can come in many forms, and there's lots of new tools out there every day, something new is coming out, so it's very hard to keep on top of it. So I think a lot of people think of generative AI as just sort of a one-click process, but it can be used as part of your workflow. I think the visual effects industry is going to be the most impacted by it. Here's a little explanation of the stills.
So by now, the whole world knows about generative AI and prompting.
Christ, this is old news, let it go!
Detailed images can be made in seconds just by writing a sentence. But there are other tools within these programs that can improve your images. ControlNet lets you start with a sketch or a photo and keep the composition when it's turned into AI. Outpainting lets you expand your image beyond the original prompt to create a world around your characters, for example. Here are some images I've made without painting, and yes, a little bit of fixing up in post.
Probably manipulated in Photoshop.
There's also in-painting, which lets you get rid of something in a photo, like an ex-boyfriend. Through AI, you can now take a pixelated image and make it sharp again. My favourite program for this is Topaz Labs. CSI was not lying, the impossible is now possible.
Can you zoom in on his hand?
Adobe is attempting to have a more ethical AI tool by using its already massive database of images, which they own the copyright to.
Look, the arrival of strong artificial intelligence has been inevitable for decades.
Can't stop it now.
I guess I'm quite torn on the ethics of it too. Will this be a tool that helps creative people or not?
We got no food, we got no jobs!
Righto. Okay, so here are some stills just showing the difference, Midjourney version 1, 6 months to a year ago, and what's possible these days. Okay, so when I started this ridiculous hobby, I began posting to Instagram. Quickly, I found there was a huge community of lovers and haters. It's extremely divisive. It's people that are running AI generation competitions, that sort of thing. But on the negative side of it, I get a lot of illustrators contact me, and they want to debate the ethics of AI. And obviously, I understand their perspective in many ways. When one of my images was posted on Design Boom, I got loads and loads and loads of negative responses. Anyway, I'm sure we'll be talking about the ethics later. Personally, I don't prompt any artists' names, and I've got no interest in creating deep fakes. There you go. On a flip side of things, I had this lady contact me, and she wanted to use one of my generated images as inspiration for her traditional art, and I thought that was lovely. And I think that AI is often used best when it's just a form of inspiration. And a fun thing that happened for me was when this guy, Alberto, who's one of my animation heroes, he's an Emmy and Oscar-winning animation director, he contacted me, and some of the things he was saying was, I totally want to explore AI rather than Google to find references. He's well known for the most beautiful storyboards that he paints himself, and then he has huge teams of animators that create his projects in CGI. He said, keep doing it and build a relationship with your robot. There you go. That's it for me. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we would like to present a series of explorations that form part of our AI-assisted sketchbook project, which we have been working for nearly a year now since AI image generators became widely accessible. As academics and creative practitioners, we have been actively engaged in using computational tools, such as parametric design and digital fabrication for over 20 years. These are some of the photographs of some of our architectural and landscape projects which have leveraged digital design and fabrication tools in the past. For this presentation, we will be focusing on the emergence of generative image AI tools, which have become widely accessible recently, as this offers another capability that hasn't strictly been part of computational design so far. We understand that many emerging AI tools allow us to automate optimization processes, which is an extension of existing capacities in parametrics and other existing computational design explorations. Our exploration of this new capacity is influenced by the research documented in a book that we released in 2022, Systems Upgrade, which resonates with the discussions surrounding these new AI generative tools. Rather than claiming that digital design represents a radical break from historical lineages, we recognize the importance of learning from existing architectural and design history to push the design culture forward using digital tools. We devised a form of digital archaeology, which involves reverse engineering and studying the material intelligence of historical cultural artifacts and embedding this into generative associative models. The associative model becomes a medium that facilitates the production of a new and novel design iterations, drawing from material intelligence of historical precedents. So from these models, we can generate new variants that benefit from historical intelligence but are novel. As we delve into the exploration of generative AI, we became intrigued by its potential as a deep learning tool that assimilates a multitude of historical cultural artifacts and establishes associations with images and text. This led us to investigate whether engagement with these AI tools built upon existing cultural artifacts can generate aesthetic or cultural novelty. We recognize that innovation and creativity are often rooted in previous cultural knowledge rather than being solely radical innovations. The last few months of sketching with these tools has been motivated by a search for strategies and techniques in which this new medium may help to generate novel or unconventional images of designs. We initially explored the use of image-to-image AI generative models, examining how these tools can be used to generate different material effects. It began with using text to describe complex material assemblages and graduated into the use of text and image prompts to do so, once we became comfortable with the relationship between the text and the material effects. We try to extend our explorations with the Systems Upgrade project using image generative AI, using the renders for our project as image prompts. This exploration expanded our understanding of operating within an economy of images, as well as the interplay between text and images in generating novel material effects. Many of these explorations focused on generating material effects per se, and not strictly speaking architectural designs. Through text and image prompts, we try to write odd material effects into architectural images in search of some degree of novelty. This series, using DALL-E 2, riffing off the OMG category for Airbnb properties as a framework for generating cabins with unusual material effects. During this process, we explored a wide range of material effects, from coiling and weaving to experimenting with the smoke and painterly aesthetics. For us, this involved having to come to terms with how descriptions of material effects produce corresponding imagery while trying to produce novel effects.
So another strategy we examined was the idea of one of the things that AI does very well is the blending or hybridizing of different, let's say, references. So we tried to do that through AI prompting, seeing if we could generate novelty from that. So drawing inspiration from the concept of hybrids, such as the griffin, we explored blending different elements, objects, or references to produce new aesthetic outcomes. We also kind of very much acknowledging that, even in figures in the history of art or imagery, who are often associated with radical or singular aesthetics, typically draw, blend, and mix references and lineages from throughout history. So in the case of Picasso, mythology, Velázquez is very much a reference, and in the case of Van Gogh, Japanese woodblock prints from figures such as Utagawa, Hiroshige are definitely clear references in many ways, right? You can see if they were prompting this, you could actually see the name in the prompt. So we search for compositions that incorporate combinations of references and objects, and this approach tries to leverage the power of the AI tools to produce new AI and new aesthetics by quickly making these uncommon blends or hybrids. Other blending, we have also tried blending things of very differing scales and different types to actually see what can come out of that as well. So this is really just kind of using AI tools to search for the possibility of not simply returning things that are already established somehow. Trying to accidentally find novelty, if you like. So in this case, also using bags or shoes and combining that with the scale of buildings to then all of a sudden generate unusual or unexpected, let's say, materialities and spatial compositions, if you like. Another possibility with these tools is the use of images as input prompts. So you can literally use your own drawings, and I think Hilary has shown some of that earlier. And these can be used in tandem with text prompts. So these are kind of still life, floral still lives that are preceded by very rudimentary sketches, like intentionally very rudimentary, but together with text and image prompts, one can kind of steer them in a particular way. So again, intentionally very rudimentary drawings, one can actually produce images, generate images of architectural designs using very clearly your own kind of, let's say, input. So the reason why we did that is because we were quite interested in the idea of using AI generative tools as a way to kind of actualize, tighten the range in which it was exploring and put a tighter leash on it in many ways. I think it became after a while a bit tiresome for it to feel like a lottery every time you press generate somehow. So we're totally acknowledging that these are not good sketches, but it just gives you a sense that if you add detail and a certain quality, even the color range, you're able to kind of steer the AI in a very particular direction. But then even within that context, you're also able to generate differences within that. And we also think that sort of starts to blur a little bit the question of authorship and agency within the AI process, because there's a lot of discussion about that, I guess, particularly if we let the AI simply be the kind of pokey machine of images, if you like. Another thing that we started to do in terms of trying to kind of find the possibility of or generate novelty is to kind of intentionally use unconventional imagery, either to confuse the AI tool or to see how the kind of diffusion process can actually regenerate or rebuild the images. So starting with the kind of anamorphic skull of Holbein the Younger's The Ambassadors, and using that as an input and seeing ways in which that can actually return, in some cases they're kind of unexpected or quite interesting ways in which it reconstructs that image. I quite like the one of the shadow casting one as well. And again, very simple. It could even be very rudimentary renders that allow you to, let's say, want to explore material qualities even further. And then the other thing that's quite interesting is that even a very formless visual input, depending on how you define the text prompt, can actually rebuild that with the diffusion model with very discrete parts as well. So you can have that formlessness can actually take on a different quality with certain other kinds of detail, if you like. And testing it with the Francis Bacon portraits as well, which again generates its own degrees of interest as well. So transposing this into architectural design, we thought to explore the idea of chance and serendipity in the design process. So borrowing from the methodologizing of accidents or unexpected outcomes that come from playful processes that we've seen from recent design history and made kind of quite famous with the kind of Frank Gehry's appearance on The Simpsons. So, taking very well-known images, intentionally doing this. So people who are from the Melbourne design architectural group will know the kind of famous Venturi experiment by ARM, trying to do our own variations. And then from that, seeing how the diffusion model actually regenerates and rebuilds these, from these blurring into unexpected outcomes, which, if we are going to be running the lottery, maybe the lottery could be run in an interesting way somehow, on these things. Okay. Okay, so finally, the other way in which we found these tools compelling as accomplices in exploring expressions for design culture is not just in the technical formal aspects, but also using it in service of delivering a particular narrative or communicating a particular theme. So, for example, for a project proposal, we used AI to recast cultural references from different communities and sites in Melbourne to integrate them into new novel assemblages and new visualizations that make us rethink or re-see existing Melbourne sites, if you like. These were proposals to actualize imagery for polyculturalism, where cultural references can be mixed or reconsidered. And this is a example of a series using text-to-video AI tools, which, is just like a simple sketch of that, seeing how you can actually recontextualize these references into other kinds of compositions and assemblages, if you like. And finally, we've also been using it to explore how AI can help us imagine or speculate or communicate our imaginations or speculations on climate futures. So we've developed a series of images communicating how our lives and the ways in which we design the worlds that we want may shift under the climate emergency. Here's an image critiquing a beloved part of modern architectural history, which we used for a public presentation recently, kind of using AI tools to generate let's say, polemic image devices. So by using AI to generate novel imagined futures and forms, we deployed the climate imaginary to project what our lives under climate change could be. For instance, where we've been thinking about we'll be thinking more about geoengineering rather than geographies. And these mock magazine covers that we'll end with here are done for a forthcoming book about using the imaginary to address or engage with the climate emergency, how the design community might start to do that. So this is one with a future where re-insulation becomes an aesthetic determinant, tongue-in-cheek, but our priorities about what our houses should look like might change. Our houses will take on different qualities and aesthetics. The things that become part of our everyday life shift, and how we value them becomes different as well. And a change in the machines that we covet will also change in principle. I mean, these are basically highly speculative and to some extent tongue-in-cheek, but using AI to actually help us imagine beyond simply just the formal outcomes that it produces. That's in many ways how we can also stay in part of the kind of conclusion of the part of the process of steering the AI to have some cultural meaning, perhaps. So in conclusion, this exposition of a very kind of initial sketchbook with AI highlights some of the tentative potentials of AI generative tools in the design process. It's a very early and incomplete exploration of how we can leverage these tools to imagine futures for our design culture and creative practices. But even only within a year of their wide dissemination, we're now beginning to understand that these are not without their own limits and risks that the medium and technology brings. We kind of started off with this question of whether this generative tool that too easily rehashes what exists keeps us in a static cultural loop, where culture just continually eats itself. Because these are tools built on existing cultural artifacts, can it actually produce novelty? After just under a year of trying out, this remains still an open question for us. Okay, thank you.
Hey, hello everyone. I'm Nick Bao. I'm a lecturer at RMIT, School of Architecture and Urban Design. Thanks for David and Leire to invite me to join this event. So AI is a quite hot topic, and many of us started using AI in a different as a tool in different fields like ChatGPT and Midjourney. Today, I will briefly introduce of my research and experience in AI design. I'm not using too much AI, but my research is related to the digital fabrication and generative design with the structural performance-based design and robotic fabrications. Firstly, to quick introduce my research is mostly is inspired by the nature, especially the nature structures. 30 years ago, the typology optimization method is also very intelligent. Like you can see the apple, which is optimized. The shape is simulate the apple shape. Which is influenced by the gravity, and later we use the topology optimization method to generate the structure design. And also, this algorithm is still very intelligent, and we just need to input the load and boundary conditions on the 2D and the 3D geometry and objects to let the computer to calculate for us. And most of the algorithm is widely used in the node design, furniture design, and small-scale projects. And the architects started using this algorithm to on the building design and building component design. And we are trying to use developer and modify this algorithm for more diversity results. So you can see the algorithm can generate the multiple results for the 2D cantilevers, also the shell design with more results, and even the facade designs. And in the past few years, I also integrate with the Swan Intelligent to integrate with the topology optimization method to generate to develop an algorithm which called Swan BSO to integrate with the BSO method with the multi-agent systems to training the agent bodies to form the best and the most efficient structure optimization results. So you can see the result have different performance in the different datas, and we also both testing in the 2D image, also testing in the 3D images, 3D models. And some of the results we're testing on the some projects, including some all the project has been built, which is including XForm 1.0, 2.0, and intelligent forms. And from last year, we're trying to test using the AI or GAM system to train or accelerate the optimization methods to use the AI to help with to increase the speed of the optimization process. So we training we just produce over 1,000 of the results, then import this result into the optimize GAN, then to training the optimize GAN, and using the cost generator, fine generator, and using the computer to simulate the structures. So you can see the real structure result and the AI generated result have very slight difference, and we also improve it to make the result better. So you can see the red color is the very slight tolerance between the real structure result and the simulated result. So I think now that we have. It's very hard to use the AI right now to simulate the structures because of structures have a three-dimensional. So we're now only testing on the square and also dealing with the 2D solution, also with very less the data set. There are a lot of very technical stuff I talk about for my first half of my presentation. Now I want to introduce some teaching in my design studio at RMIT, which is called Marine Utopian, which is explore the design as an agent for understanding and responding an issue in the marine environment. And the students investigate the floating infrastructure and the ecosystem for the coral reef habitat using the innovative parametry design method to develop the projects. A lot of the Blender, Grasshopper simulations in the softwares, which is not too AI driving, but it's still save a lot of time to produce the outcome and the results. And the student they spend 3 months to develop their own brief based on my general brief and design a single building, the floating infrastructure to create a different moment of the marine utopian ideas. And last summer, I trying to take students' narrative idea to using the Midjourney to put the keywords of put keywords and ideas into the Midjourney, which we call MJ bots, and to input the input description and the key points and short sentence to generate the images. So it's very quickly to generate multiple results, and the input can be consisted of a long sentence and short sentence, and they a very quick send back us the results. So I just using like 2 afternoons to generate all the images from the students' work. It's quite efficient, but I still find some limitation of the AI and Midjourney. It's quite like a powerful collage tool, which is save a lot of our time on the Google search and Photoshop. Once we move to the simulation with the wind load and the water flow, wind load and the water flow, you will find this is what AI and Midjourney cannot achieve. And also, it saves a lot of time for the designer to do the modeling and the rendering using the AI image-based tool. It's still hardly to dealing with the design details, achieve the high quality of the 3D model, video, and the images, and to creating the space for the user. So I'll talk about a lot of the disadvantage of the AI, and also the last bit, and I want to talking about. It is quite harder also working on the robotic fabrication, which part of my research. And so you can see the image showing the RMIT robotic lab, and I use the lab and also produce a lot of interesting project. But this project for the fabrication process is hardly using AI to dealing with a lot of detailed things for the to making the mold, 3D printing mold. Even we have very intelligent robots can do the 3D printing. We still take a lot of time on the for the modeling, for the fixing the model, also assembling and installations. The process of designing this pavilion is very efficient and using the 3D printing, intelligent robot to printing the components of the object. But when we move to the construction, it is very hard to achieve using the AI. Maybe later or in the future we can training the robot how to do a more intelligent construction. So you can see on the site there's heavy concrete components and and on the site, actually there's a video. There's about like 50 workers working on the site to assemble the projects. Okay. So I think there's quite a limitation for the AI and to working on the fabrication side. So that's the video is here. So it cannot save the time and save the labors actually. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Mond, and today my talk is titled Rocks and Us. So I'm the founder of United Make, a multidisciplinary design studio based in Richmond, Victoria, and we've done a wide spectrum of projects, from virtual reality worlds of Piranesi with imaginary prisons in VR, to designing the largest physical and digital ceiling in New Zealand with 14-hour animations, to a Burning Man sculpture in Byron Bay, to a bus shelter in Tasmania. We're a group of eclectic designers that try and tackle problems of today with creative solutions. And now, before I begin, I have to preface that everything I say today might be redundant tomorrow because the landscape of AI is emerging so quickly. we wanted to give you a bit of an insight to maybe how a practice or a small practice like an SME is using this type of stuff. I'll be revealing some data from our studio, as well as maybe some ultimate questions that we should maybe be asking ourselves when delving within this technology. So we have generated 3,123 images in the last 5 or 4 months, which is in an average of about 20 per day. So we've been playing around with a little bit. Just to put that in perspective, Van Gogh did 2,100 paintings in his entire life, and Monet only did 2,500. So in 5 months, we've generated more images than all those artists. Now, as a local multidisciplinary design studio, we're going to give you a bit of insight from when we started. So it was about October last year, 2020. This is when Midjourney and DALL-E and all that really started to take form. We've been experimenting before that with GANs and everything, but that's for another time where we made a learning algorithm. But we're mainly focusing between October and now. So there's 2 types of categories I want to talk about. One is buildings and products, which is non-image based outputs. And then the second one is exhibitions and artwork, which is more image based outputs. So on the x-axis, you will see that the discover, design, detail, deliver, that's a very redacted process of what we do in our studio. And then on the y-axis is the value of design, value of AI. So in terms of buildings and products, that is the value distribution that we find, that because of AI, we can generate so much ideas. But as the previous presentations were talking about, they're very much like, let's just shoot in the dark, let's give it some random prompts and let's see where it will go. There's a bit of a dip, just because you have to make a decision, right? So at the end of the day, all these ideas come out, you have to make a decision from the, I guess, discovery phase, and then you can burst wide out again and then create your design. But then as you sort of build, as Bao just showed before, as you start making it reality, you sort of see that reality really starts to hit. I guess the funny thing is, about 10 years ago, I was interviewed on a podcast, and they basically asked me like, oh, you know what the future of AI is? I'm like, yeah, all the blue collar jobs will go first, right? And then all the creative stuff will come last. But actually, we're still trying to sort out AI with self-driving cars. We're still trying to work out how to do it in the physical world of making drinks. But poetry, illustration, landscapes, and drawings are all basically taken up by AI these days. Okay, so the second type is actually exhibitions and artwork. And the reason why I say this is because this is what we've actually found, right, for the value of AI. Because when you have exhibitions and artwork, the output is actually images, right? So that you could actually show pretty images and stuff at the end. So we've done a lot of exhibitions that now stock images are, I guess, redundant, because you can just make them now. You don't need to find them and search them. You just put in a prompt and they're basically done. So these are just some basic value things that we've generated that we think that could apply to anyone. Of course, this is just now. We don't know what the future might hold, but if you're all keen on it, this is the learnings that we found. And some data as well. So in our office, we also do a lot of research, deep research, immersive research, ethnographic research, and whatnot. We found that it sort of sped out our efficiency about 32%. The reason why we still need to cross-reference it, cross-check it, make sure that it's all right, make sure it's in the right country, make sure there's due diligence done behind it. But also it's really good for quantitative research, not qualitative, and it's only valid to September 2021. Admin though, admin has shot up through the roof in productivity, such as writing emails. You know, a client responds and you're like, oh, I don't want to respond, just write me an email. Fee proposals, digesting huge amounts of information in briefs to distill down, writing sort of correspondences. It's definitely increased about 256%, so about 3 to 1 almost. So, you know, you can really speed that things up. And I think this might sort of chuckle, because all the designers out there sort of feel it as well. Even though we have all these tools, we still suffer as a designer to generate things because we can always do it better, right? So although the output was really high, like we generated so much more images than we could in the time, still making that decision to be like, this is the one, like was the same time that we had previous to AI. Now I'm going to give you a short slither of a sample set in our team. So for example, in a team we would have a creative lead, a graphic designer, and a technical designer, and then they'll have their own skill set, right? And then during the time, I think I'll need to talk to Dr. Rosenbaum later, but we asked AI itself if we had to humanize yourself to make you more approachable, what would you name yourself? And then it's sort of setting itself saying, I could be Claire with AI inside of it, or Marion. And then it just had all these skill sets that rather than being an AI, we sort of humanized it. So it has its own weaknesses, but also has its own ability to collaborate. And from a skill set of this, it actually made the team so much more impactful and empowered to actually work. So we were able to speed it all up. And then we also asked ChatGPT itself to name yourself if you were an AI, and maybe the biases in itself called itself Claire. So basically we said ChatGPT is Claire in our office, and it will help us on projects. So of course, emails, email responses, cover letters, concept design, it helped us, made sure that our spelling was correct, our grammar was correct and all that, and that was a matter of seconds. And then, of course, we asked it to write some Python code for us because we were writing a script for Rhino 7 at the time. And then, you felt a bit lonely and you asked it some questions like, I feel a bit lonely, how can you help? It will give you some engaging ways to communicate. And then I also thought that, well, I'm giving a talk today. Oh, sorry. Oof, went to the end. Sorry. I have to go back all the way through. So basically, I asked it, if you had to talk about the duality of AI and the pros and cons of it, it created me a poem in 15 seconds, and if you may, I'll read it to you. In the realm of creation where the digital thrives, design intertwines with AI, together shaping lives. A dance of the binary, a symphony of code, in this duet of minds, innovations explode. A tool of power, an ally in design, AI offers its wisdom in every line, enhancing our vision, augmenting the real, opens up vistas, new worlds to reveal. Yet there lies the duality, a two-edged sword, in the hands of the many, a blessing or discord, the promise of progress or a foreboding decline, in the reflection of AI, both shadows intertwine. It streamlines design, automates the mundane, yet could creativity, essence wane? In the heart of the artist, a question takes flight. Will AI dim human spark or make it shine bright? As designers, we navigate this digital sea, balancing on the edge of what's and what might be. With the power of AI at our command, do we lose or gain the upper hand? In the face of the future, two pathways unfurl, AI and design together shape the world. A two-edged sword, a paradox to wield. In this dance of creation, what will be revealed? Crazy, right? So that's Claire. And this is Marion. And Marion has definitely helped us in generating images in Midjourney to help us visualize our dreams. We were commissioned to do artwork for a landscape sort of store inside Melbourne. And we were completely open with the client that we wanted to generate this through Midjourney. This was Midjourney 4 at the time, and it generated all these images that the client basically picked, and we were just the ones that picked it together and helped it with the prompts. And that was just basically done in about 2 hours of our time. We also recently participated in the Regenerative AI Space competition, which was by IKEA. We explored the symbiotic relationship with humans and AI. And we really delved into what probably David and Leire were looking at, especially in the beginning. And we literally just did a sketch on a napkin. And we're like, okay, well, let's see where this rabbit hole will take us. I think one thing you have to realize, especially in that early stage, is you have to give up some control. Yeah. The things on the right are all the text prompts that we did. And of course, down this route, we went down lots of rabbit holes and down different types of aspects. But this was what it generated. And then a biocenter of community grown from trees of eucalyptus native to Australia, as well as we asked it to what the insides would look like, as well as what the ceiling would look like as a vegetable garden. And luckily, this one has the right amount of fingers. And I guess now in this information age where information is so abundant and the resources that we need to create things are so, I guess, affordable, how do we make our decisions anymore? How do you know which one's good? It used to be the skill set of your technique or skill set of your talent, but now that you can generate anything, anywhere, anytime, what does it mean? What is our role? And the really big important question for us is, where do we trust this with our data, right? So as you all know about OpenAI, Microsoft, Bing and all that, what information are we feeding it? And I do hope that open source, all those things happen, that we have a bit more of an open, transparent conversation, hopefully we'll have later. But the one thing I want to end with, maybe, is a bit funny. I was having a conversation with one of my ex-students the other day, and we came to this realization that we've made rocks think, right? Because supercomputers themselves are a combination of copper, nickel, cobalt, aluminium, tin, zinc, silver, gold, palladium, all those rare earth minerals. And then I'm like, where am I going to find this photo of all these rare minerals? And then Marion just whipped it up for me in 15 seconds. So I also have to preface that this was in collaboration with Claire and Marion. And thank you so much.
This as well. Okay, great.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, David and Leire, for the invitation to share our experiences with AI. It's been wonderful and insightful to hear all the other presentations, so thank you. My name is Veitan, and this is Patrick Macasaet, and we're from Superscale Architecture, a research and ideas-led experimental creative practice. We're going to focus our presentation through a project that we've been developing over the last 6 months, titled A New Kind of Wonder, as part of the Federation Square Experience Lab grant. So it looked at developing new types of immersive experiences through both a creative and entrepreneurial lens. It has nurtured the emergence of the Immersive Futures Group, made of creative practices, institutions, universities, First Nations initiatives, and tech enterprises. To give you a bit of background, in the last few years, we've heavily invested in experimenting with gaming technologies and how it might inform and impact architectural design processes, pedagogy, communication, and future practice. And we think it's important to note that our entry into the gaming world for architecture wasn't mainly about the technology, but that it was a pedagogical and cultural interest and concerns for our students' experiences during the 2020 pandemic lockdowns. But that's a different story for another day. Alongside our gaming experiments, we've dabbled with AI in bits and pieces, but A New Kind of Wonder marked a milestone for us. It was the first project where we actively incorporated AI as a valuable tool to assist in the development of a project that involved real clients, real-world constraints, opportunities, and parameters. It provided us with an opportunity to venture into unfamiliar terrains for us, a new industry and discipline, one that places immersive experiences at the forefront of entertainment. So we have 10 minutes to talk about. So we will talk through 3 touch points. The first being the expanded toolset, the second, the thing is not the thing, and conclude with intelligent worlds. As part of the project of New Kind of Wonder, we've been developing Future Now, Mist and Shadows. Future Narm, Mist and Shadows. It is set in a speculative flooded future version of Narm, which is Melbourne, that explores the cultural, environmental, and mythological importance of Birarung Mar, the river. We're exploring relationships and ideas on what our future cities might look like at the intersection of technology and the four Cs, being city, culture, climate, and country. It encompasses multiple layers, integrating gaming technologies, real-time simulations, immersive architecture, and provocative storytelling. Its purpose is to foster discourse, provide entertainment, and share ideas on hopeful futures. To get to this stage, we had to navigate many unfamiliar territories that we were not specifically trained for. So we are not concept artists, but AI, like many of our presenters, allowed us to visualize the many stories we've been refining into imagined worlds that engage with contemporary concerns. We're also not writers, but AI allowed us to start the narrative-making processes and again begin to merge the many conversations we've had from different disciplines and backgrounds. And we don't consider ourselves as game developers, but AI allowed us to start conversation on possible game mechanics and crafting game design. We're not copy editors, but AI assisted us in crafting our language suited to different audiences. It's a very different language giving a presentation to students and academics versus giving a pitch to executives and investors. And we're definitely not business analysts or accountants, but AI provided us with information to at least kickstart our financial projections and business modelings. So it wasn't just about making pretty pictures or provocative text for us, but also delving into numbers. So you can see some of the things we wouldn't talk, hey, this is ridiculous, these names. What are the other options you have? So the use of AI allowed us to amplify our toolset by allowing us to engage more informatively with things we don't have enough knowledge, and in some ways empowered us to engage more effectively and creatively with the unknown. I will leave it at that and pass it on to Patrick to continue.
This leads us to sort of the second point, which is, I suppose it's our attitude towards AI, that the thing is not the thing, which basically means that for us, the use of AI in our creative process allows us to generate ideas and facilitate conversations more easily within our small team. But it's crucial to sort of recognize that the output of AI is not the ultimate version for us. It only serves as a stepping stone to spark conversations. And as creatives, we maintain a sense of control, curation, and critical judgment over the generated content, and we always say it's not the boss. We're the boss, quite similar to what Mond said before, where it's just there to really sort of assist us. And if we relied solely on the financial tool set provided by ChatGPT, for example, we're pretty sure investors would say no. Similarly, AI-assisted visuals help us imagine future worlds. We're purely guides and references to help us three-dimensionally build our gaming worlds. And I should also say that there's a physical component to this project, but we don't have time for that. But it requires creativity and discernment to determine the usefulness and viability of the AI-generated elements. And for us, really, AI serves as an assistant rather than a replacement, working alongside us without taking over. And I suppose I'd like to touch on a future projection, I suppose a provocation on where all of this might lead for us, which is really the blending of world making, gaming, immersive experiences, architecture, and AI. And this project stands out for us, and you kind of wonder, because it goes beyond fantasy and delves into acknowledging and amplifying local narratives and contemporary concerns to enable new possibilities. And AI was part of a larger ecosystem of place that already had rich, deep knowledge of country, histories, culture, and stories specific to Melbourne. And we think that's one of the challenges of this project, on how we might use AI to work with and design for the specificities of place. And so far, we've seen text to image, text to text, image to image, text to video, text to model. But we're also exploring text to video games in the testing of these ideas and creation of stories and worlds. We've also been experimenting in the making of intelligent worlds, meaning worlds that could learn and simulate real-time ideas, and which involves imbuing behaviors within gaming environments where characters, objects, and elements exhibit programmed actions. Now, this is nothing new. If you're a gamer, you know your NPCs or non-playable characters and the like have their own encoded programmed behaviors already. And in the past, we've experimented with these concepts, like Wonder Wonder, one of our past projects where robotic drone bees might sting you if you get too close, or gigantic sort of futuristic chickens will hit you if you touch their eggs, don't touch your eggs. However, our aim is to take it to the next level, which is really embedding learning capabilities within these entities. So embedding learning agents within intelligent learning worlds. And this is what we're experimenting with our FedSquare project, which is a real-time simulation of speculative ideas within gaming worlds built with gaming and AI technologies that is then projected within a physical environment that engages with contemporary concerns while acknowledging and amplifying local narratives and culture, and what ideas and discourse that might contribute for architecture and design. And so I think just to conclude for us, the AI is less about generating the thing, the perfect image or the perfect prompt, but more about questioning and revealing to surface things we haven't thought about or imagined just yet. Is it helping us visualize and imagine things that we wouldn't otherwise been able to do without AI? And is it allowing us, coming from an architectural background, is it allowing us to think about design, designing, or do design differently? And leave it at that. Thank you. We just.
Hello? Okay. So we're just going to now have a question and answers session, but also a general conversation. So I'll just invite all the speakers to join us here, and then we'll have start with a couple of our own questions, and then we can open up to the floor if you have questions as well, right? Okay. Oh, sure, go ahead. Right. So we originally were going to have Dr. Gabby Bush moderating the session from the University of Melbourne, but unfortunately she fell ill today, so she's provided us with some of her questions. So we'll present a couple of questions just to warm up, and then once we've warmed up, we can open up. There'll be a roaming mic that will allow you guys to ask questions directly to the speakers as well. Yep. So, ladies.
So yes, I might pose Gabby's first question, which is open for, basically it's a question for everyone here in the panel. How do you define aesthetic or cultural novelty in the age of AI? Start with a tough one. Yes.
Whoever wants to answer the question, I'll pass you the mic.
I think it's pretty open because it's open to anybody. But one of the statements that I'm hearing often now is, are we doomed to repeating things that we've already seen before, since we are building from an archive of images available to us, especially in the image-to-image, but in any of the other areas that you guys have presented, or that we have all presented, basically.
I think that we're certainly seeing an issue where future data sets are going to include mainly a generative work. And so then we're looking at a potential stagnation of creativity that we need to interrogate and examine. So the best way to do that is to not use the AI as the end point, but as that stepping off point. It's to interrogate what the AI is creating and how. And aesthetically and culturally relevant, it's up to each of us individually, but it's also up to us to examine, culturally relevant, is that just a white US-centric version of culture, or is it, a global perspective of culture, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Any other?
Add to that, I think it doesn't really sort of, as Jay mentioned, it's not the end point. I think for us, it's always just to spark that initial sort of conversation. And I think for us, at the end of the day, it's really sort of the the specificities of the project, where you are, place, the own sort of creative's judgment, and to sort of ensure that the AI imagery is not the thing that sort of gets carried through forward, and that there is sort of that own personal agenda or position within the design sort of project that you sort of carry through.
Somebody else wants to give it a go?
I think in the early days of AI, we could really pick out what AI was. Like, that's an AI-generated image, especially with GANs. But now we're getting to a time when everything's so exponentially being generated that it's really hard to tell the difference between what is human and what is AI. And another thought experiment that we had one time in the studio is that, similar to chess, that if a pixel has only 255, RGB values that it could generate, all the images that you can generate in a pixel of, say, 16,000 by 32,000, then any type of image could be generated, and every type of image already has been generated by AI. So then it'd be the question of, well, what do you want in your aesthetics? What do you value? How do we make those ethical decisions when everything has already been done?
Maybe also just shifting if it is about the way that AI influences culture. I think to some extent we're already starting to see some instances where that's happened. So I don't know if the audience are aware of, there was once somebody had generated images of Donald Trump being arrested by the police, and that made the front page news, right? And there's the Pope wearing the white coat. That's the other thing that I think hit the front page news. Drake and The Weeknd doing a song together was also another AI-generated thing that kind of somehow has entered the cultural imagination. But so I do think that it's already sort of creating a culture around it. But I guess the question is, what do we think about that somehow, right? But we can move on if you like.
Okay. Again, this was another question that Gabby sent us for all of you. This was specifically for Jay, Rosenbaum, Bay, and Patrick, but also open to everybody else here in the panel. As AI is essentially large mathematical equations with labels built into its core functions, what is AI, or what does AI without labels? AI that is creative, immersive, and new, what will it look like? How do we balance the math with the art?
Oh, God. I balance the math with the art by not understanding the math very well. But I think that it's about that balance again, but it's also about what would AI look like without labels? Labeling your data is critical in any form of science. We all know that. It's qualitative science. You need to label your data. And so AI automatically perpetuates that. But what are we without our labels as well? I mean, labels exist absolutely everywhere. So it's about kind of, do we want to envision a world where there isn't labels and we don't have that sense of community, or do we want to envision a world where we're free of labels? Maybe there's a difference there, and I don't have the answers to that, but it's interesting thought experiment to explore the different ways that it could look, and that sense of freedom or sense of constriction and loneliness.
Might have a different take. In terms of the balancing of those worlds, I think with the project that we mentioned before, I think what was quite difficult about it was that we were really trying to navigate or curate many voices. So, there was sort of technology, sciences, First Nations, us, In many ways, it's sort of us with the AI as well, finding that language. I mean, there is no sort of one correct answer, I think, at the moment, or will ever be. But I think it's sort of finding that that balance. And I think also what we sort of mentioned before, like, we're not many of these things. Like, we came from an architectural background, so we're really just hacking and infiltrating and seeing what these things could generate that we haven't, imagined before.
One thing that I'm sorry, I know it's directed to you, but I'll just try and put it in.
It's open to everyone.
Yep. One thing that I think is quite interesting is that one of the major models providers has open sourced their model, which means that there's a lot of, let's say, possibilities for personalization and customization. So I know that there's a lot of people making their own models, making their own embeddings, and then actually having a very kind of big effect on what gets generated using their own imagery, if you will. So that image-to-image stuff that we showed is like a very kind of small version of it, but people actually make models based on their own work, if you like. So I mean, that for me seems quite interesting. When you open source it, that you're actually able to move away from the central model. You can actually make your own versions and make your own labels associated with the image that you attach. And I think that could be quite fruitful if that becomes much more accessible for people to do, I think.
Anybody else wants to give it a go to that question? Nick or Mond, Hilary? No? Okay. So here is one that, again, is open for everyone here in the panel, but I think Hilary was initially written for you by Gabi. Some of the big questions of AI generators are about copyright, IP, and data ownership, especially for artists. Do you space for the artist to opt out? And if so, how do you think that could affect the cultural loop you see playing out? How does this affect animators and practitioners in the space?
Well, I mean, with anything that we're doing at the ABC, I think when I had to convince the lawyers to be able to do the Gruen project, for instance, it was very important to say, look, we're probably not going to have anybody worried that I've stolen their work, because we're not going to be prompting any names, making sure that we don't, I think that's very important. Other people would say it's not important. But like I said, I've had illustrators contact me very concerned about losing jobs. And I think where it's mostly going to affect is probably the junior roles. But I don't think many of the animators are worried about that at the moment, because I find that it's very easy to tell. These days, you can look at an AI image and say, was that created by a human or an AI? But the really good human art, you instantly know that wasn't AI. There's still so many things that you cannot do. So I found it quite difficult to use it at the ABC, because we've got creative directors. They'll say, okay, well, can you adjust the image slightly? Can you make it blue? Can you make it red? And this is just not easy to do yet with AI. So it still only has its place as a tool to help. It's not final output yet, I think. So I'm not too concerned about it. Does that answer the question? Yeah. I mean, there has been cases where, I know, for instance, anime artists have gotten really upset because the hardest thing is that this tool's been put in, the public can use it now. That's the most difficult thing. And if there are people that will completely copy other people's work, and that's a horrible thing to do. So it's sort of a moral judgment and trying to use it in an ethical way rather than a non-ethical way.
Do you think we should open it to the floor, or one more question? Okay.
I don't know if somebody else wanted to address this last question. Otherwise, since many of us are academics and professors here, I have a question, which is, how could these tools perhaps be used in education? How could we introduce them in an education setting? Any ideas?
Yeah, so I think for the AI in the teaching, firstly, from last year, the Midjourney is quite popular in the world, and most of students using MyBrave to input into the Midjourney, to creating some conceptual design for the first few weeks, which is I stopped them to using the AI because they lost of the opportunity to thinking and also the critical thinking or the creative thoughts. They're just using AI as an inspiration. But now I find the AI can help them to do to find more the ideas, but they have to write by themselves without the ChatGPT. They have to using their own idea to put into the database to get the idea and get the images, which is better than they just purely or directly using the AI to generate the image for the teacher or for the design studio tasks. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. Any other thoughts?
So I actually teach critical AI as part of the digital media program at RMIT. And so the way I teach is to explore, sort of like, okay, here are all the tools you can use. Isn't this exciting? Look at all the things you can create. Now let's look at it critically. Let's look at what are the issues? What are the copyright issues? What can we talk about with bias? What can we talk about with all of these limitations? Where does my work begin and the AI end? Where does, think about, use these tools, yeah, but use them critically. Think about what you're doing and why. And I think that that's kind of a crucial part of the conversation.
Thank you.
I'll second that. I mean, I coordinate the master studios at RMIT, so I see this all the time, the use of AI. And I think what's really important is that students are able to sort of critically judge the work that they do, that they have a position or an attitude towards the ideas that they bring, and that the AI is, just there as as an assistance. But I think it's all students should try and at least experiment with it, because I think it does open up new avenues for thought. But it's really that critical judgment that needs to develop as they go forward.
Thank you.
Well, personally, I think one of the things is being equitable, right? If one student's using it and another student's not, then how is that fair? So either open it up so that everyone can use it, and then I also think that show your process of using it. I think the critical engagement, how you're using it, what are the learnings from it as part of the process, because we know that it's inevitably going to happen, right? Like if you go out to the workplace, you're going to be using it, some people are going to be using it, so really trying to ban it, trying to find scripts to see if it's ChatGPT, but then the GPT chat has a humanized function now. So like it's an endless cycle of like, competing with each other. So for me, running a studio, I will open it up. I will definitely preface that you are using it, right? And you are playing around with it, rather than say it is your own work, but it's more of a collaboration. And then let's learn from it. I think the biggest issue for me is like, well, what are we actually feeding, right? Is OpenAI the best one, or is it Microsoft? All that type of stuff I think is another bigger issue than the tools itself. So that's just me.
Thank you. So unless there are any other, David, are you gonna?
No, I was just going to say if we should.
We can open
is
it
there
to
any
the
questions
floor
for the
if-
audience? Please
yeah.
just raise your hand if you have a question, and we can. There's a roaming mic.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've got a really loud voice, but I'll use it anyway.
Thank you.
Just wondering what the panel, thinks about the open letter that was circulated, I don't know, it was probably a few weeks ago now, asking for a pause on AI research, and what your thoughts are on that. Because it's going to take over the world and kill us all, apparently.
Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot. I do have views about this because a number of the people who signed the letter and wrote the letter are futurists, or there's a very much the future of life, and you sort of go, oh, that sounds good. But no, when you scratch the surface, they're actually very pro-eugenics, and a lot of them are fairly, questionable ethically. So I'm like, well, okay, so where do you benefit from these and why? And there is a lot of concern about AI, and I understand that. It's scary. It does some scary stuff. But, the idea of pausing, we need regulation and we need meaningful legislation in place. But pausing, I don't see is going to actually help anybody particularly. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, hi, my name is Emery Brennan, also from the Melbourne School of Design. And also, by halting the AI development, I think it's just for systems that are like more sophisticated than ChatGPT-4. It's not all AI development, but Max Tegmark, I think he's at MIT, and he's one of the co-authors of this letter. And he goes on to explain that even computer scientists didn't really expect for these language models and all these other to advance so quickly. And everything that for years ethicists were saying do not do with AI, such as, don't put it on the internet, don't give it access to the internet. And then here you have like chatbots, it's saying don't, another ethicist is saying don't teach it about human beings and human psychology. And anyway, this isn't really about design, but here, it's solely keyed into social media. And, there's a reason why, it's not just Elon Musk buys Twitter. It's not because he likes to tweet funny memes. It's because he's gathering all that data for AI. And then there was another thing, I forget, they said don't do, but anyway, that was a side issue. That's not my real question, which is also for the panel. And, oh gosh, I kind of forgot what it was, but I guess, though, I was intrigued by David's concluding comment about, like, we're at the Sputnik moment where all this AI is coming from existing databases, and so are we just are we going to stop creating new things and just regurgitating what exists now? And is that just eventually going to, even in terms of architecture, create this homogeneous path? And then I do have a question for another panel member in terms of copyright, and I guess to add to the AI culture. I don't know if anybody knows Grimes, who is Musk's former partner. She just came out and said, look, you can use my voice for anything AI generated, but you just have to give me 50% of the profits. She's like head of the game. And then I saw someone put her voice to the Beatles song, Baby I'm Amazed. And actually it was pretty good. So I'm just wondering if Grimes can do this, then can visual artists and architects do this as well and have some type of watermark on their work, and so that when it's used, and if AI can do all this composites, can they also tabulate the ownership and therefore the profits, a percentage of profits for an AI-generated work of art?
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. That's 4 questions in one. That's perfect. I think you're asking general. So let me see if I can remember. I'm going to try and answer one. So you started about the issue of the dangers of AI. So the interesting thing is that at the moment, so I'm going to talk about this very, very much as a novice. What I'm talking about here is just what I have heard on podcasts. Okay, so I'm not a scientist, but my understanding is that there have actually been in the research of AI different avenues which people have been looking at to get artificial intelligence. Large language models is one, or machine learning is one, and another one is something to do with symbolic. There's a kind of symbolic dimension of the way that you're thinking, so you actually don't need to feed it trillions of data sets to be able to predict, but it's actually doing what we typically are able to do, like abstract things and then, think about things in an abstract. So there is a kind of parallel line of research, apparently, I understand, that's looking at that as a way of doing it rather than having this very expensive models of lots of data. Some people are saying that's perhaps one way in which ethics can be embedded into AI, perhaps. But again, like I'm telling you, I'm just saying that as a person who's heard a podcast. Okay. The other question that you had about the novelty, whether feeding it data. So that in our particular case, the very kind of sketchbook we try to present. We try to present strategies that we've kind of seen in the past, how visual artists or designers have worked with existing, but we acknowledge that, at least for us, we never believed this idea that designers claim that everything's a radical break, right? So there was a moment when digital design became very big in architecture. There would be a kind of disavowal of history as an influence, and we always found that very suspicious, right? So, in our case, we think that it's always there. Like, we're always drawing from historical references in different ways. So the different strategies that we tried to present was to try and see how we think other designers have done that, either tacitly or explicitly. So, blending of references, and maybe the uniqueness of that blend generates something new, or various kind of techniques. So that's one avenue that we were looking at. And sorry, Anne-Marie, I can't remember the other questions because my brain's not big enough, but no.
Yeah, I think a few weeks ago, there's a lecture by Matthias Campbell at RMIT, which is Conversation with Roland Snooks. They're discussing about back to 20 years ago, there's not too much the design style like Zaha Hadid or Frank Gehry's style, and how the people can input the keywords into the Midjourney to generate the images. So I think we still need the designer for the new design. The AI is just an assistant for the designer or for the to helping with the avoiding the repeated work, but we still need a designer creating the new design or innovative things rather than just using the existing resources.
I think Jay said it at very beginning, responding to the very first question about how do we create novelty, and you mentioned something about, in the end, it's going to rely a lot on the individual, how we use the tools. And I truly believe that. I think that even in the images that we see out there now generated by AI, there are many that, to me, are not very interesting. We see the references straight on, especially the architectural ones that I'm much more familiar with. And they seem to be just a rehash of things that we've seen for a long time. But yet, there are some that are managing either through creative techniques by which they use the AI tool that I truly see novelty emerging, but very much relies on how we are using the tool. And it's true that at the moment, probably many of us are using it, David and I, as a sketchbook, as we call it. In other cases, it's been mentioned, I use it for ideation or early stages, but at the rate that AI is moving forward, very soon we might be able to get much more out of it than just that early sketch in architecture. But I still feel that when we move on to those stages, it's going to continue to rely heavily on our creative way of engaging with it, and that is what is going to drive novelty or not, So that's, I know I'm coming back to something that you stated earlier, but I thought it was a very important thing to say today.
I think there was a question here. Yeah.
G'day. I'm an architect, work in the corporate sector, and I use AI pretty extensively in the front-end process. I'm in a moral standpoint of whether I tell people that I use AI or not because of the public perception of it. I was just wondering whether you think it's important to disclose whether AI has been a contributor to a project or not.
Yes.
Always.
I think that absolutely, saying that it has a collaborator and contributor, like you're working with it, it's not the one that's running the ship, of course, but being open about that at the beginning is very important, just because I think that there is this connotation in society right now that, people are really scared of it as well. I guess we've watched too many sci-fi movies to really have that in the back of our brain as well. But, in telling them that, it is a process that is just enhancing what we're doing, I do have fears about it as well, but I think that's just my cognitive biases. But I would definitely openly say that we do collaborate with it. And if you want to humanize it, give it a name, but it's also an AI, right?
Thank you.
I just want to ask a following question regarding, how we work together with AI. Can AI generate its own aesthetics, and how, or it's just up to the satisfaction of human interest, how you can work together with that? Is that a possible way to generate new knowledge?
Yes. Personally, I think that, if you've seen some of, let's say, Rafiq Anadol's work, where he would scan all of MoMA in, and then he would do a map of these types of styles and these types of references, and then the AI itself would start to patch in different areas that it thinks it's missing, and it would start dreaming in that aspect. And those things, I think, right now would be, cause of concern. But then, how do you label it? Will the AI label it itself? And then I think those are the questions that I would ask. But definitely, yes, there will be an aesthetic that AI could generate. There could be stories that AI could generate, poetry that AI could generate, like right now.
Yeah, I guess that's the question, say, how we can evaluate and what's the standard for that?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it's a question that's been around even before, even when architects or designers started using algorithmic processes, which are not that intelligent, right? They're just kind of algorithmic processes. There was already that question, the stopping question. When do you decide to stop? How do you decide to choose which iteration, right? Because you can set very, algorithmic processes to generate multitudes of possible instantiations of designs. And how do you make that decision? That was a big question that came out when people like Greg Lien and all of those people were starting to do that stuff. So I think we're probably going to keep asking the same questions. I think with the Rafiq Anadol example, even though there's a lot of serendipity that comes out of that, the process is still set up by Rafiq, I guess, and his team. But you might be talking more about an AGI future where we reach the general intelligence where it's able to make its own decisions, right, somehow, right?
The singularity.
Yeah, the singularity. But apparently that depends who you talk to is next week and 30 years away. It depends who you talk to. So.
I think it's interesting, the idea of AI aesthetics, because in a way we had them. When we started with GANs and we started with the earlier AI imaging, there was a very distinct aesthetic to them. Style transfer GANs, they had that because of the iterations of the developing of the image. There were these grids, there were these artifacts, and you could always see and you would go, yes, that's AI generated. And we've actually been going away from that towards more photorealistic, towards more getting rid of the traditional, like 3 months ago, Mid-Journey aesthetic that was so eponymous. And now it's photorealistic, just like all of the others. And I'm like, okay, at what point are we going to deviate again and get these more unique aesthetics back? Mid-Journey did have a very specific aesthetic. You could look at any image and go, that was generated by Mid-Journey, as opposed to Stable Diffusion or DALL-E. But yeah, that's just, because that's a question that haunts me quite a bit, so.
Luciano, another question here.
Yeah, cool. This is probably more in the area of like the United Make, but as a agency, what's your integration process of AI in projects like branding, website builds and stuff like that internally and then with your client? At what stage are you getting AI to inform your processes and help you out, and then at what stage you use it not being a part of that process?
Absolutely. So I think pre-project, we use AI internally as a thing to develop inside. But then if there's anything, if we start, working with them, we have to acknowledge in the beginning that, do you want us to use AI within the project or not? If they're really fearful of it, it should be in the contract itself. That if it is part of it, then we all accept that it is. If not, then we don't, right? So I think that's something that has to be open and transparent, because I think internally as well we've had that discussion, and then if some employees don't want to use it, it's absolutely fine as well. You're not forcing anyone to use a tool that they don't want to use. But we found that the adoption of it in terms of just empowering them, right? They can basically have 24/7 help whenever they want. And we are very sensitive of what information we share with it as well. So if there's proprietary software or things like that within our company, we make sure that we don't upload that, especially if it's ChatGPT or Midjourney. But if there is something that is general knowledge, common sense, then we go through that. So there's a bit of a sort of induction process as well on that, and I'm sure that that will happen in the future as well.
Maybe should we take one more question? And then
we have two more, I believe,
okay, two more, then
at
we'll
the front, and another one. Okay, 3.
Hi. I'm Linus from Swinburne University. Artificial intelligence is quite English-centric, and the images that, for example, Midjourney uses, it also relies on how the English language prompts it. So understanding the labels, or English labels, and how it's associated with images. The data bank itself is also depends on how much is captured or documented, whether is it most of the images from a Western society or from the Eastern society. So, and I'll give an example because I got my students to use it. When they were using Midjourney to generate sceneries, or not sceneries, scenes from Greek mythology, images were perfect. When they tried to do it with Chinese mythology, it gave a very English portrayal of Sun Wukong. And in the Indian mythology, it came out nothing like the mythology itself. So since artificial intelligence and design culture, I had 2 questions. One of it was, what do you think the impact of artificial intelligence is on non-English design culture? And the second one is, how can we as designers preserve, protect the non-English design cultures?
do you want an English person to answer that or a non-English person to answer that? So just my 2 cents worth in is that so the models that were saying that there's a lot of this open source, there's a capacity to make your own models, and I wonder if that might be something that needs to be done, that we need to start making multiple different kinds of models that have different cultural understandings, I think. At the moment, this is what's happened. We've got 3 main ones largely coming out of the UK and America, but that would probably be where I think we should go, that we start building different models, I think.
Mine is just a question. Did you use English to ask for Indian mythology, or did you use Indian? And as well as, did you use Chinese to ask Midjourney in Chinese as well? Because some languages you don't do, right? So the syntax and lexicon that you do use is equitable to what actually is generated. So that was a question. It wasn't Hindi or anything, yeah. So I think in the future, when we start expanding the syntax and lexicon of language as well, I think it will better understand, because I think some languages you can't translate words throughout to different words, right? And I think that's something that is exciting in a way, but also scary at the same time, I guess. But I do hear you with biases, because when we ask about a name, it came up with a very Anglo-Saxon name, and then when you sort of generated Claire, it was a very, Anglo-Saxon looking person that was very, gender biased as well. So I hear you.
And I'd also say that that's where the human comes in, because you knew it was wrong. You're not going to use that design. So, people always talk about the AI doing it, but there's always a human behind what you're doing. And for instance, at the ABC, we've got to be very careful, that gender biases, race biases, and things like that. So we just would never use anything if it was wrong. So don't forget that, I guess.
Can you hear me okay?
Paul Rankers is my name. I'm an architect. I also work in property development, and my brain's going to the commerciality of this topic, and I'm thinking about the process of real estate development, architectural design, and fees and costs, and the impact that what we're talking about now might have on that, and also disclosure. In architecture, I've seen a lot of conversation over the last 10 years about what they call the race to the bottom in terms of fees, which is a whole other conversation, which concerns me a lot because I think it's had a very serious impact on the quality of architectural services that are able to be delivered. Putting my real estate development hat on, I'm thinking about a scenario where anyone here might be involved in the provision of services that contribute to the creation of a real estate asset. And it's in the DNA of a real estate developer to beat people up as much as possible on fees. I'm curious to know at what stage of evolution the commerciality is at, particularly taking into account the disclosure of the utilization of AI. So that could be architecture or some other service, but my expectation, for example, would be if we're starting to have a conversation about disclosing and collaboration with an AI tool or identity, I'm curious to know, well, okay, is that going to make it cheaper for me? If it's going to make it more effective? That sort of line of thought. Just curious to know if there are any views on that, please.
So at the risk of giving you
too many ideas.
Yeah. so a lot of the stuff that was presented here was a lot of it was image generative AI, which is a very small part of what's happening. There's also AI is also being used a lot for optimization processes, and there are a few platforms that are emerging, which is about optimizing or automating documentation process. Optimizing planning, those things are emerging, or they're being developed now. So, I mean, in those terms, I think it's coming down the pipeline, and I guess that streamlines the process. But we have yet to see what it is because they're not fully out yet. And my impression at the moment is that they also have their limits for the moment. So it'd be interesting to see what happens. But certainly, there seems to be investigation into it, but. Because, at least speaking for myself, I'm quite interested in the creative dimension. I've kind of like blinkered myself to that and looked at the creative capacities for it. But I'll let other people perhaps answer the.
How can I put this? So I think that in terms of the mundane menial task in our office, as you've seen, there's a huge spike in sort of efficiency in that. And it's also just empowered a lot of people to, send emails out, double check things, make sure grammar mistakes are done. What I think about in the future as well is that, how is it equitable, when people who don't have these tools compete with people who do, right? And, one of the aspects that I'm fearful about is these big technology companies that own all this stuff, right? And I feel as though that from our company, we want to be as transparent as possible, because it means at least we can start the conversation, right? Like if we're open about it, other people should as well, so it's not secretive. But it is coming, right? And I think, your head will be in the sand if you say that, don't worry about it, it's not going to affect me. I do think that there are still niche, things that people do like. There's still hand-drawing architects out there as well that like to detail by hand, and they have their own niche, right? It really depends on, who do you want to be? What do you want to do? You're not forced into it if you don't want to, but you just have to market yourself better as well, I guess. Personally, I feel as though that I encourage a lot of, the next generation to actually understand the tools themselves and make their own critical understanding if it's for them or not. But unfortunately, that, the stock market's all done by algorithms now. There's so many things in terms of posts on Instagram are done by AI. It's just happening around us. And that's what, I guess, the paradox of today is now, that we've sort of unleashed Pandora's box, and now we're trying to shove it back in, and we sort of can't, right? So I rather understand it than be blinded by it. So I think that is my recommendation from understanding it for 6 months. So that is my most expert opinion that I can provide you for today, and tomorrow will be redundant.
Thank you. Maybe we take, if there's one more, we'll take one more and then we end there? Yeah.
Thank you. I don't think there are any product designers on the panel, but in terms of the three-dimensional real object, how is that status of the product, the artifact, being affected by intelligent design, about the emphasis and the sexiness, I guess, of intelligent design at the moment? And how do we encourage students to think about other aspects of design, the haptics, the other sensory attributes of design, particularly product design and interior design, and of course architecture, when they are being well and truly seduced by the visual?
You ask the student to make it. So because, you know, all these image generation softwares are very seductive and they're very sexy, but once you ask them to 3D model it, to understand the whole image itself, if it was 3D, then they get into trouble because it's made of computer and that structure doesn't hold up that column over there. And once you start transferring that into 3D, into the reality of the physics of, you know, reality, real world, you'll see a big understanding of what is good and what isn't good. So that is what I would recommend from the seduction of the image to actually real life. Because the other thing that we talk about is the iceberg of design. The top is the sexy image, but to make it happen, to actually go to product, to actually make what people want, there's a huge thing that I feel that universities sometimes don't talk enough about, because we're always, you know, do a design studio, let's design the next museum, you know, let's do that, but it's always just the image. It's not actually experiencing it as well.
Right, one of the great things that digital technology, as you probably know, has done is it's given us the capacity to very quickly materialize and prototype things now as well. So that, you know, within the education stream, you know, I've been teaching personally for over 20 years, but even within that short period, there's been quite a sea change that all of a sudden you've got capacity for students to prototype things very quickly within the studio as well. So because of digital fabrication, and maybe AI will also make that even more easier. And also in terms of the 3D versus 2D thing, my understanding is this text to 3D is here. It's coming. It's already kind of here. So I think we're actually being wrapped up. So thank you very much to all the speakers for the presentations today, and for actually what I found myself a very exciting conversation. And thank you very much for all of you for coming as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
David will